Welcome back to another Penpot tutorial. In this video, we're going to be using the drawing tools that we've already learned and practicing to build this simple website user interface landing page. We're going to be learning about masking. We'll learn a little bit more about gradients and transparency. And then we're going to use this in the next video to learn about constraints, which is when we can resize our page and it will respond dynamically and the buttons will move and everything will just sort of resize depending on the size of the web browser that we're looking at this page in. So for this video, we're going to bring out our layers panel and I'm going to create a new page, this page 1. And so we're just empty canvas here. I'm going to click the board tool and left click and drag our board. If you remember from the last video, the board is sort of our view or our document size. It's going to be the size of our web page. So we can click this presets and scroll down and go to this web 1280 by 800 is what I'm going to do in this case. I'll hold down the control wheel and scroll out. And I wanted to mention too, this control wheel while you're holding, the control key on your keyboard and scrolling out on the scroll wheel on your mouse, you can zoom in and out when you're in the canvas. But if you hold down the control key over in the actual interface, it resizes the whole interface, and that's because that's just what Google Chrome does by default. Even on if you're on a different web page, it'll do that too. And so that's just part of Google Chrome. And so if you accidentally do that and you're wondering why everything's all messed up, you can just click reset up in the corner. That's control. But for zooming in and out on the canvas, you can do the plus and minus keys on the keyboard or that control key. But just be aware that might happen to some of you. So I wanted to mention that. What we're going to do is create this web page with some text and navigation across the top. So to get started, I'll just click this text tool and I'll zoom in here. And we'll just type in, I did blue heeler because I used a picture of my blue heeler dog. And this is using the same, I already chose this font here. It's this Poppins font. This is one that just comes built in. It's a very common, popular one. I think it's a Google font. And then we can left click and highlight this second portion. And if we go down, we can change it from regular to bold. So this is something that people do sometimes. They'll have like, if it's a multi-word, they'll have one be regular and then one bold. And this is just in place of a logo. So instead of drawing or importing a logo, so we have this blue heeler as our branding sort of thing. And then we'll come over with more text, and I'll create a text navigation over here quickly. And we'll just say home. This is taking the same style as before. So we can keep that size 16, but we're going to change it back down to regular. And then with these, I'm just going to right click and go duplicate. And I want to show you if we drag this over a certain distance, it will match this distance the next time we do duplicate if we do the control D on the keyboard. So if I select this and do control D, I have to show it the pattern once. So I can bring this over, now control D, control D, control D, it'll repeat that pattern. But if you right click and go duplicate like I did, it doesn't repeat the pattern. That's only if you do the control D on the keyboard. So it's kind of a nice feature. I'm going to double click in here and I'll do, just rename some of these real quick. This last one, login, is going to be for a login button, and we can maybe create that real quick. We'll drag it over here to the edge, and we'll just draw a rectangle around it. And because we're drawing the rectangle on top now, it hides the text. So remember, we can right-click and go send to back, or we can just grab this text, left-click and hold, and drag it above the rectangle, and that will also create the text on top. I want my text to be white, and we'll change this button to a different color. Maybe we can do like a blue button like this. And then also, I think we learned this in the last video, we can give it a quick little drop shadow by clicking here. And also it's nice to have maybe a stroke. So if we do a white stroke that's 1 pixel wide, and we'll drag this transparency down to 50%, and that's just of the stroke. And remember, transparency, if we go on the blue here, transparency is just how invisible it is. So if we change this transparency down, it looks like it's becoming lighter, but it's because it's showing through to the white behind. And in a minute here, we're going to use transparency on our background image. And so that'll illustrate that a little bit better here. Something else we can do with a button, there's this corners. So right now it has a 0 radius on all of the corners. And our button here looks like it is just about 49 high. So if we change that, maybe we'll do like 42 high. So if we did half of that, 21 in our radius, it'll create pretty much a pill shaped, like a completely rounded corners of all of this. And if we go above, if we use the scroll wheel, we keep going more than 21, notice it doesn't do very much. if we were to resize this, it would. And so the radius is, depending on the size of the rectangle you're doing, you sometimes need to calculate out that radius. So that's 21 here. But if we do less than that, then it's more of a rectangle with just a slight rounded corner. So sometimes people like to go for this look of a complete pill shape, which is what we're doing here. And then something else we can do, we can apply a gradient to this. So if we click back in here in the blue color and we go to our gradients, we have a linear gradient or a radial gradient. And the linear gradient just draws, it does our color at the top blue, and then it goes all the way into transparency. So if we click this top color, we can change the top color, the color that it goes to. And then if we click the bottom color, this will also change the color that it goes to. And this is with full transparency. So if I drag this up to full color, now it just looks the same as it did. But if we want to do like a purple fading into blue, we could do something like that. And then if we want to change the way that this gradient hits this object, we can drag this over here and we can do it from right to left or something. And we can even drag it out more and show like how faint or how strong it's coming in. And so that's a little bit how gradients work. Anyway, we'll just keep this here for now. Let's make sure this is centered. So we go center and center. Oh, this is a problem I talked about that we can have last time. I selected the text and it disappeared when I clicked the alignment. That's because it's aligned it based off of the board because I didn't select the object behind the text. So I got to go find this login now. It's going to be in the center. Oh, the very center. Oh, where'd it go? Okay, I'll just find it over here. Oh, there it is. It's white, so we can't see it. So if we click this, we see our text went over here. And I didn't want it to go there. So let me scroll up here, and I'll left click and drag it back on top so we can see it. And now if I select both the text and hold down Shift and select the rectangle behind it, now when we center it, it'll center relative to the actual rectangle that we drew. Now they're both selected, they're centered. I'm going to right click and go to Group. So now we have this group button with text on it. There's a better way to make buttons, and I'll show that in a video coming up here. But for now, this will work. So we'll just drag this over here roughly where we want it to be. Actually, I'll put that up so it's lined up with these. There we go. And these are all lined up. Now these, I didn't actually do anything with them yet. So let's put a little more space between these and we'll select them all because we learned about distribute in the last video too. We'll click distribute. Now there's equal space distributed there. I'm going to right click and go to group so that I can center this as a group on the whole page. So if I scroll out a little bit, hit this center, now they're aligned in the center of the page. And actually I should have done this first. Bring this up here. And if I want all these to be aligned, which I actually do, I can just select all of them and just say align all of these guys relative to themselves along the center line. So now we have this bar, and if we want to see what this looks like, we can just go to change our view mode, and we can quickly see this is what our website looks like so far. We have our logo in the top left corner, we have some different buttons to click on for navigation, and then a login button. Now let's add an image. So to add an image, we just come over here, we go insert image, and I'll choose an image that I downloaded from Pixabay. I'll include a link in the description, so if you're following along, you can use the same image, or I encourage you to find your own image that you want to use. This is larger. This is a 1920 by 1080, so it's larger than our entire board. So I'm going to left click and resize it. And again, if you need to select it, you can select it over here, or you can select it on the canvas. But we'll resize this to be the same size as the board. We could type it in, but I'm just going to freehand scale this all the way up here. And I'll drag it down a little bit. You can press the arrow keys on your keyboard. It's called nudge. You can just nudge this image a little bit. It moves it 1 pixel at a time by default when you use the arrow keys. So there we go. This image is our sort of our background. And now if I want to write some text, which I do, I can say welcome, change this text to white. And this is going to be difficult to read if we make this even a little bit larger because it's against this background that is very colorful and kind of strong. And so I'm going to want to change this. I'm going to want to make this image a little bit darker. And to do that, there's a couple different ways, but the way I want to show you is by making it more transparent. So if I come down here, I can make our board a little bit taller. I thought I did this already, but let's make this taller so we can actually scroll down on our website. So now we'll just make this the same width, but now I'll make it quite long so we could scroll down if we wanted to. If I want to be able to read this a little bit better, especially if you're up here in these white clouds, sometimes people will you could draw a box behind it is one option. And then we right click and go send backwards. And then you can make this box, for example, we can make it a gray color and give it some transparency. And then that helps set it apart from the background a little bit. But in this case, what I'm going to do a rectangle, but I'm going to draw it across the whole image. So I'll grab this rectangle tool and I'll draw and make sure it fits the whole image. And then what I'm going to do is set this rectangle to be a black color, all the way black. And then I'm going to put it behind the image. So I'll right click and go send to back. It's all the way back behind the image. So we can't see it. We see there's this rectangle and then we have our picture. But we can't even see that rectangle until we apply some transparency to this image. So I'll come down here and under this layer, it's just saying 100%. So if I use my scroll wheel on the mouse, I can lower this down and notice that image becomes darker. As it becomes more transparent, it's showing through behind to what's behind it. So for example, if we drag our image right now and do this, we can see up here in the corner. And this is a look that sometimes people want to go for. You can have an image showing through on your navigation menu, but it's showing through. Even the button is seeing through now. Well, technically the image is on top of the button and you can see the button through the image. And the more we change this, the stronger the image is. And at 100%, the image is so strong that you can't see anything behind it. So if we made this 50% and then we put it on top of this black, it gives it the appearance of being like a faded image, which is what we want it to be. Now notice our welcome looks, we can read it much better and the image just kind of looks a little bit nicer. So that's one method we can do. And I'm going to select my image and then shift select the rectangle behind it, or not shift, I'm sorry, that selects everything in between. I'm going to select the image and then control select the rectangle and then right click and go to group. And now that's one group. If we expand it, we can see this is our group. And now if we want to move it around, it'll move together with that sort of darker look already applied to it. Control Z, we'll put it back to where it was. And then for this welcome, I'm going to copy this text over. I had some sample text here, right click, copy. But of course we can just write up some new text and I'll go paste. So I have some sample text under here, also in the same font already. I'll select both of these by holding the shift key and selecting each one, left clicking each one, and I'll set this right over here. And now I'm going to put another image over here. So, oh, actually what I did, I think I had a button in here too. So we can select this button over here. And this button is called group right now. And as a good practice, I haven't been doing this, but we can rename this group to login button. So if we double click over here, or we'll just call it button. And that helps us very quickly know this is our button. If we click on this group, it shows us this is the group of the navigation menu. So we can double click and just call this nav for navigation. Also, the things we name in here, when we hand this off to the developers with the code, it's going to see it says nav there and this says button. So the names that we give this, if you're developing in a team, there might be a certain way that they want these named. So it's important to name these so it's not all just called like group, group, group. That can get a bit confusing. And so this one that's the background, I can double click and call it background. And so it's a good idea to name these when you're designing and have a consistent naming convention. Now I can click this button here and I can right click and go to duplicate, and I'll just drag another button down here. This will be sort of our call to action button. For some reason it's appearing below, because it's below the background. So I'm going to left click and drag this background all the way down to the bottom so that everything that we draw will go on top of it. And this is what I was talking about, is this button with this gradient doesn't really match this image very well, I don't feel like. But we want this to say learn more, so we'll expand this. We'll go to the text and change it in here. We'll just say learn more. And we'll resize this button so that it goes more like this, and then we'll make sure that this text is centered inside there. Very good. Maybe we'll center all of this. We'll center the welcome. We'll center all of that on top of there. And now we're going to put a little image here to show what we're looking at. We're just about done here. We'll grab another image, and this is the image of my blue heeler when she was a puppy. So it's just a rectangular image, and we could put a border on it. You can do borders. If we go to stroke, just like we could with our rectangle, we could add a stroke to this to kind of set it apart from the background. But to get rid of the stroke, we just push the minus over here. What I'm going to do is mask this, and I want to show you guys masking. What masking does, it lets us create a custom shape for this. So we could just do round. If we click on the ellipse tool and we draw a circle over top of this, I'll hold the shift key to make it uniform. Now if we want to create a mask and only show what's inside of this circle, what we can do is shift select each of these. So they're both selected, the ellipse and the image, and then we can right click and go to mask. And now that creates a mask, and right now it's sort of inverted. So if we expand this mask, it says mask over here, we have an ellipse on top and then the image below. So the reason we can't see the image is because the ellipse is still on top of it. So we can left click and drag this image on top now. And now we'll see the actual image in there. If we get back into our selection tool, we can move this image around and reposition it in there. I think we can even, we can resize it from within there. So it's kind of cool. We have this. And if we want to release these items, we can always go to this mask. We can right click on it and go to unmask. And then it breaks these things out again. We have our ellipse and our image. And it doesn't have to be an ellipse either. So we can, let me bring that back. If I erase, it's still called a mask over here for some reason, but I think if I go to, I can drag the puppy outside of it, and I can just delete, right click and go to delete the mask. We can draw a custom mask also. To do that, we talked a little bit about this path tool. So if we select this and we want to create sort of a custom shape, I can just left click, and then every time I click, it'll create a point. So if I want to create a custom shape, I can do this very quickly. And then hit the enter key on my keyboard, and I have this shape here. Now if I hold down the shift key and select both the image and this path, I can right click and go to mask, and it creates a mask of that. Again, it's the same thing as last time. I need to drag the image on top. So I drag this out, and now it's showing it. Oh, and this is actually kind of interesting too. The image is being masked through right now, but because it was only a stroke, we're only seeing the part that was visible. So if we come down to stroke on our path and we increase the stroke size, notice it's actually showing our image through inside there. This is not the way that we'd want to do it, but I just want to show you what this is doing. What we want to do is apply a fill. So we need to go to get rid of stroke with minus, and then we need to add a fill, and that will just show it in there. And it doesn't matter what color this fill is because it's not really being used. It's just the shape is being used to show through to the masked image. If you're familiar with masks already, then I'm sure this is not really news to you, but that's how masks work in graphic design programs. Anyway, so we have this mask now. We can move the entire mask, the entire image around. And I don't love that one, actually. I'm going to steal the one I had from this other one. So we'll just right-click, copy from this page. And this is another useful thing you can do. You can copy from one page to another, which is great. So we'll put this over here. Okay, very good. And now if we wanted to, like I'm just going to quickly draw another rectangle down here. Okay, I just wanted to create a little bit of content down here. And before we move on to the next video, let's do one more gradient. So if I click on this rectangle and we'll just change this color, we can do, I never showed a radial gradient. So we click radial gradient. It's the same thing, only it just has some different handles here. We can change the strength. And then also, just like with the other one, we click one part of the gradient and we can change the color. Then the other part of the gradient, we can change that color. And by default, it's always going to be into transparency. So if we move this color around, we want to do green, it's not really going to show. It'll show going into that green a little bit from blue, but then it's going into transparency. So if we want it to be really strong, we can change that so that nothing is being transparent. There we go. And so we can do, in this case, if we want to do something a little bit more subtle, this just gives us a nice look of like a dark blue gradient into a light blue center. Okay, now that we have this drawn up, it's important to know that this is just an image. So if we were to change our board size, we can click on the board and we come up here. If we resize this, it just cuts off and it doesn't behave like a website. You know, if you resize a website, the the navigation menu resizes, some of the picture content resizes, and that all has to do with constraints, this constraint section. And that's what we're going to learn about in the next video, is how to make the different objects drawn on our image respond when it's resized. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below about the process we did today. And in the next video, we'll be talking about constraints. See you then.